spirit of love in this place. You can't see it, but it's there, just as precious as the air. There's a spirit of love in this place. There's a presence of peace in this room. There's the presence of peace in this room. In God's tenderness is found peace that passes human bounds. There's the presence of peace in this place. Oh, hallelujah, sing hallelujah. We bless your holy name. Oh, hallelujah, sing hallelujah. There's a spirit of love in this place.
Good morning, friends. I'm so glad to welcome our congregation, whether you're worshiping at home or in person. Thank you for being a part of First Congo, however works for you. Yes, there is a spirit of love in this place and in all the places that we are. So come, let everyone in all our sacred spaces receive the love of God extended in and through this community. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here.
In grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils and snares, we all have already come. 'Tis grace that brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Okay, I'm going to bring it down really quiet now, because something that I've really missed is singing with my friends. But something that's safe that we can do for everybody at home and here in this room We're going to bring it down really nice and slow. And we're going to hum. You can still feel that vibration. So as we go back to verse 1, we're all going to hum.
Hi, buddies. So good to be with you this morning, and I'm really glad that you're here to join in worship. So this week, I've been thinking about something that I used to love. I loved it so much, and I can't wait till I can do it again. We used to have a bunch of people at our house. All of our friends would come over, and we would have the biggest dinner. Now, some of my friends are vegan, or they have certain allergies to certain foods, and so we would always make sure that we had something for our vegan friends to eat that was just amazing, something truly delicious. And then something for our friends with allergies. We made sure that everybody was taken care of, that everybody had exactly what they needed. And we would sit at my kitchen table and we would pull up every kind of chair that we could think of, and we were smushed together and we were all laughing and eating, and we would have the very best time. Well, it got me thinking about that last meal that Jesus had with his friends, and some people that weren't really his friends, people that would turn out to betray him. And Jesus broke bread for all of them. Jesus fed all of them, made sure that they all had exactly what they needed. And I try to imagine what that meal would have been like. Maybe it would have been like around my kitchen table with all of my friends and laughing and having a good time together, knowing that we were all taken care of and all special and all had exactly what we needed. Well, Jesus still invites us to that table. It's called communion, and we celebrate communion together as a community. And at that table, we're all equal. Everyone gets exactly what they need. And it helps us to remember that when we get exactly what we need, we're able to help other people get exactly what they need. And we're able to be filled up with love and joy, and we take that love and that joy and we spread it all over our community. Isn't that an amazing thing that we get to do? So I want you to use your good listening ears and listen as Pastor Leanne talks about what communion looks like and what it looks like when Jesus sits around the table with his followers. Buddies, I hope that you get to experience that with your family and your grown-ups this morning, that you get to sit around a table with them and experience joy and love, and you get to laugh and have fun. I can't wait to hear all about it, and I can't wait to hear how you're doing. I'll see you really soon, okay? But before we go, let's say a prayer together. I'm going to say a line and you repeat me, okay? All right, let's go. Dear Jesus, thank you for your love. Help us to love others the way you love us. Amen. Bye, buddies.
I want to invite you to take a moment to center ourselves. Divine wonder, your creation stretches vast and wide. The heavens are covered with your splendor. All of the cosmos is filled with your beauty, with your attention to detail. Yet, our little patch of dirt, this entangled bank, has become threatened, even more so now than before. Daily, we are reminded of our anxieties about the future, about the changing condition of the planet, the plague of racism that still haunts our relationships, and the need to scapegoat others in order to justify our ideologies and actions. The uncertainties and ever-changing dynamics of the pandemic continue to threaten our existence, our connections, our very way of being in the world. They magnify the very fears and anxieties concerning the state of the planet, the privilege that serves to foster and give energy to racist tendencies, reminding us yet again that life is fragile on this bank, that life is interconnected, interdependent, that life is precious. We mourn the loss of dear friends and find it difficult to tend to the rituals of passing, to the rituals that help us to move on. So let us find resilience. May we find a sense of calm in the presence of others. May we find joy in each other and share concern for each other. The Holy One invites us to hold the needs of our community dear to each other, loving our neighbors as ourselves. So we offer joys and our concerns on behalf of the church and the world. Lots of prayers for Sherry's 11-year-old son who is sick with COVID. Prayers for the family of Art England, who died of a heart attack last weekend. Prayers for all the leaders of this world. Prayers for Joel Tolson Jr., who was seriously injured in an accident last weekend. Prayers for Pat and Jana. Prayers for good news in the future. Prayers for Tamara. Prayers of joy for baby Eliza Ruth. O Holy One, hear our prayers, divine wonder. Draw us closer to you, that we may desire the fullness of life, that we may find acceptance in each other, that the world may be one with you, and we may become good stewards of this entangled bank. Amen.
Imagine the people of God. Imagine the people of God. Believing, receiving, becoming God's love. Imagine the people of God. Imagine the people of God. Imagine the people of God. Caring, sharing God's love in the world. Imagine the people of God. Imagine the people of God. Imagine the people of God. Believing, receiving, becoming God's love. Imagine the people of God. Imagine the people of God. Imagine the people of God. Caring, sharing God's love in the world. Imagine the people of God.
Thanks, Joel, Phil, and Laurie. Last week I said that a scene from the lectionary reminded me of Game of Thrones. Today, the gospel lectionary sounds more like The Walking Dead, which means it's very zombie. Could be Walking Dead or American Horror Story, Night of the Living Dead, any one of a number of zombie shows. They're so popular now. If not zombie, maybe Silence of the Lambs, or some other terrifying movie about cannibalism, Jeffrey Dahmer, perhaps. Zombies, cannibals, are you intrigued? Can you imagine that I'm introing a Bible verse? Just to clarify, what I'm about to read is familiar, and by drawing comparisons with words like zombie and cannibal, I'm not being irreverent, not this time, at least. As we'll hear, this passage from the imagination of John's Gospel says that the disciples thought it very strange too. They may not have had words like zombie, but they thought it was weird. Let's read it. John chapter 6, verses 51 through 59. I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Jesus is speaking, and he says, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. The Jews then disputed among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, very truly, I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. He said these things while he was teaching in the synagogue at Capernaum. When many of his disciples heard it, they said, this teaching is difficult. Who can accept it? I guess modern day people are not the only ones who make the mistake of understanding Jesus' words literally. We started today reading in verse 51, but throughout chapter 6, everyone, the crowd, the disciples, who were mostly Jews, of course, and the Jews in the synagogue who opposed Jesus, all take what Jesus says literally and they struggle with it. Back a few verses, Jesus keeps saying that he is the bread of life, come down from heaven. And some say, wait, isn't this Jesus? We know his parents, right? What's he talking about, coming down from heaven? And in response, Jesus presses the point. He doubles down and he says, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And even his disciples respond, man, nobody can take you seriously when you talk like this. Indeed, in the history of our faith, these very verses have been used as proof that Jesus was establishing cannibalism as the defining Christian ritual. Much of John's gospel, of course, became established church dogma as Christian doctrine developed over the centuries. The church fathers, mostly fathers, right, let's be honest, have been doing backflips for centuries, trying to parse out those verses I've just read. It's funny to think of church fathers doing backflips, isn't it? Here's a short summary. Disputes center around whether these metaphors that Jesus uses, bread of life, my body, my blood, are a physical reality. Or is it a memorial feast? Do this in remembrance of me. Is Christ actually present in the bread and wine? Roman Catholics believe in transubstantiation, that the bread and wine actually become the flesh and blood of Christ in a reenactment of his sacrificial death. Other perspectives include consubstantiation. Christ's presence is, quote, in, with, and under the bread and wine, yet they physically remain bread and wine. Or that the physical body of Christ is not present in any way in the Eucharistic bread and wine. Quakers, most of them, feel that sacramental ritual is a distraction from God, so they don't use bread and wine at all for communion. The Eucharist, communion, the Lord's Supper, whatever you call it, and however you practice it, is many things. I will name three. First, it is a meal of liberation. In all the gospel accounts, it is linked to Passover, a celebration of liberation from oppression. Second, it's an egalitarian meal. It recalls Jesus' table fellowship with the marginalized and the outcast. And third, it is a shared meal. It's shared in community. Everyone is invited. Everyone is present around the table to share the bread of life. Early in the pandemic, bread baking went wild. You remember that? Everybody had a sourdough starter. Grocery aisles were empty of flour and yeast. Bread baking videos went viral. Now, Lisa and I never really got into that, but I thought of that as I worked on the sermon this week. The upshot, I got really hungry for bread. So I made some. There's this video from New York Times Cooking for no-knead bread that makes it look so easy. It's one of the most popular video recipes they have ever published, so I gave it a try. Before I go on, is there anything better than the smell of baking bread? And murmurs of comprehension of that in the house here. And when you smell it, don't you just want to eat bread? I came across a study that's published in 2013 in the journal Nature Neuroscience that says that when we are hungry, it activates the olfactory bulb and cortex of the brain. It's an evolutionary thing. When our hunter-gatherer ancestors needed to eat, their brains turned up their sense of smell so they could find food. In other words, when we smell the aroma of bread baking and we want to eat bread, it's not the smell that makes us hungry. Rather, the aroma alerts us to our hunger. The hunger's there first, and the aroma just brings it to our attention. I don't really know about that. And I suppose it doesn't make much difference which comes first, the smell or the hunger. When it comes to the smell of baking bread, I just want bread. I love bread. Bread is comfort food. When I need comfort, and these days I do, just give me some bread. I've never met a bread I don't like, unless it's one of those gluten-free, low-cal, high-fiber, low-sugar substitutes. Other than those, give me bread, any bread, as long as it's fresh. I'm hungry. Okay, tangent over. Back to communion. Communion always involves eating bread in community, sharing bread with companions. Do you know the root of the word companion? It's very interesting. It's a word that comes to us from the French. Com means with, panis means bread. Companions are those with whom we break bread. Isn't that cool? In Jesus, we meet a human who saw himself as bread for the world. In Jesus, we meet the kind of companion who inspires us to be bread for one another. Last week, I gathered with the Bernardez family for a short graveside service for Helen. Due to COVID, of course, it was outside. It was limited to family only. But they have a pretty big family. Don't know if you know that or not. When it was time to start, everyone looked around, and one was missing. And so we waited. It was important that all of the family be there, and they weren't. So we waited until they were. That's why we're not celebrating communion today with bread and wine. The family isn't all here. I mean, there's also COVID, but I suppose we could do something with sanitized containers and folks with plastic gloves on to pass it out to the people who are in person. But it just doesn't feel right to me to do communion when all the family isn't here. I see many beautiful faces gathered in person, or I see half of your face. And I'm so glad to see you. So many more of you are at home for some very good reasons. The variants are unpredictable. Your children can't be vaccinated. You are immunocompromised, or you live with someone who is. Maybe you're someone whose anxiety is off the charts, and it's just disturbing to be around groups of people. We are living in the midst of this massive upheaval in so many ways, and it's just so difficult. In terms of coronavirus, it felt like we were in the clear a couple of months ago, didn't it? Like most of it was behind us. It seemed like we were almost out of the COVID-saturated woods. And now that we're not, it feels very unsettling and uncertain. Do you know the one thing that saves me? Well, one of the things that saves me every day is you, my companions on this path. Being with you in person, or on Zoom, or phone calls, or texts, all of the ways that we're connected is like comfort food. As a church, we come together in the tradition of one who thought of himself as bread for the world. It's time for us to be like him, to recognize the manna that each one of us brings to the table. We provide bread for each other's journey. I proved this week that I can bake bread by myself in my own kitchen. Each of us, if we had to, could bake bread on our own. What is also true is that most of us are capable of baking only mediocre bread. Sometimes it feels like that's what we're doing, just out there, kind of on our own, separated from each other and from the communities we've shared. We're getting by, depending on the day, some of us more easily than others. We need each other. The problem is we can't be together, literally at least, not all of us. Which means for now, we have to persevere and get creative until we can literally gather all of us around the table of blessing and transformation. We practice seeing every table, every meal, every encounter as holy. Yes, we can still find ways to nourish and sustain each other. Friends, you are manna from heaven. You are bread for the world. In the great I am of the cosmic Christ, we are.
Give us bread for the journey, give us bread. Give us bread for the journey, give us bread. When our legs are getting heavy and we're hanging down our head, give us bread for the journey. Give us bread. Guide our way as we travel. Guide our way. Guide our way as we travel. Guide our way. With so many roads before us, where to go is hard to say. Guide our way as we travel, guide our way. Make us one with each other, make us one. Make us one with each other, make us one. All the walls we've built around us, may we learn to tear them down. Make us one with each other. Make us one. When our legs are getting heavy and we're hanging down our head, make us bread for the journey. Make us bread.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. In my neighborhood, I'm gonna let it shine. In my neighborhood, I'm gonna let it shine. In my neighborhood, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, 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 let it shine. Go in peace. Go in peace.